He's giving podcast number.
Hey, we're live,
it.
but we're actually not live. So, because we don't shoot it live yet. But as somebody who watched the last podcast will know, we'll have the radio station up and running in the next 3 to 4 months, and we will broadcast it live after that point. So
That's sort of fun.
If you enjoy the podcast, please hit the like button and also hit the subscribe button. It helps us defeat the Google algorithm, which I don't know if it does or not, but it sounds good.
Sounds like a very podcast thing to say.
Well,
Yes.
the Crenshaws. Yeah, thank y'all for being here.
Thank
Not a
you. Thank you
problem.
for inviting
Yeah.
us. This is fantastic.
Tell everybody your names and what y'all do and where y'all work. We'll start off there. That'll be good. So,
All right. Ladies first.
ladies
You want me to
first.
go
Yeah,
Okay, well, I am Brittany Crenshaw. Some refer to me as Mrs. Dr. Crenshaw.
Mrs. Dr. Crenshaw. Very good.
To figure out which one of us people are seeing, but I am an internal medicine physician. I work at East Albany Medical Center. I am from Orlando. I went to school at the University of Florida for undergrad.
We'll forgive you. Go Dogs.
You see, we
You
were
can say
doing
go
good.
you can say go
We
Gators.
were doing good until
I gave you the green
Yeah,
one.
yeah,
I gave you the
give
green
me the
mic.
light. How do you say it? How do you say it, baby?
Go Gators. Afterwards, I went to Barry University and I got a master's in biomedical sciences.
Oh,
Then
wow.
went to FSU for
Yeah.
medical school. I did my residency training at Orlando Health in Orlando, which is my hometown, as I mentioned
wow.
before, and then moved on to South Georgia because of this guy.
I'm very fortunate.
Yes, you.
Yeah.
It appears that way.
So I'm Daryl Crenshaw. Originally grew up in Selma, Alabama. True Alabama at heart. I'm a country boy by nature. But ultimately, I went to New Orleans for my schooling. Went to Xavier University for undergraduate, and then ultimately stayed there another 4 years and went to Tulane. And left Tulane and came back to Alabama, trained at UAB for internal medicine, and then traveled up to Emory and did my nephrology fellowship. Once I left Emory in 2007, I subsequently came to Thomasville, and I've been in Thomasville now for essentially my entire career. I left Emory and came right to Thomasville. I've been there 12 years. It's been very rewarding. It's interesting we're having this podcast, which, again, Trip, I appreciate you inviting us. I think, having a podcast of this caliber is quite unique, but also I think it's beneficial for, patients and lay people alike in this area, primarily because, it's interesting in my field of work as a nephrologist. This area in the United States has some of the highest degree of kidney disease. And so we see here in this area that the incidence and the prevalence of kidney disease is literally off the charts. When I go to meetings around the country, and when I say around the country, I'm talking about places like in San Francisco, Boston. I was in Boston a couple of months ago. When they show the map, the geographic area and the distribution of kidney, vascular hypertension disease, we're in the red. This area right here is in the red.
We're in the bacon belt.
Absolutely.
Or at least I used to call it the bacon belt. I don't-
Yes.
Vascular disease the same way. So one of my friends, who's an attorney over in Augusta, I told him that I was going back home to practice vascular surgery. He told me, well, that was like shooting ducks or fish in a barrel, like shooting fish in a barrel, because it seems like
Yes.
everybody down there would have it. And it's true. I mean, it seems like there's no end to it. And it's sad, really. And that's one of the things that we were just talking about, and why we wanted to get on the air is this idea of functional medicine and preventative care, and I think I went through, and I'll just tell you my story and how, because I'm a surgeon, so obviously I like things to use a pun, cut and dry.
Absolutely.
So I want to fix it, and I want to move on. Now, vascular surgery is a little bit different. I think I'd already gone to pharmacy school, and I liked vascular surgery because it was more. It was like medicine plus. So everybody was super, super sick. Oh, yeah, and they needed an operation.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of the opposite of orthopedics. That's not totally true, but orthopedics really doesn't like to operate on sick people. But what we were talking about is this, and I guess what comes to mind is this idea of are the things that we just mentioned, the hypertension, hyperlipidemia, diabetes, obesity, chronic disease just in general, is it preventable to a certain degree, or is it treatable without tinctures and poisons and surgery? And so with that, tell us a little bit about A4M certification and how that has played a role in your practice, and how have you applied it to your practice? Because you and I have the same patients. So
you figured that out.
Yeah.
I've been sending a lot your way.
Yeah.
Well, first I'll talk about how I got into it.
Yeah.
I never really heard of this field of medicine in my traditional internal medicine training.
Really eat that mic so you're in there. Yeah, pull it towards you a little
Is that
bit.
better?
Yeah. I just want to
Hello.
make sure we get all this good stuff.
Okay. So once I moved to South Georgia, I did notice that there was a significant increase in the incidence of hypertension, diabetes, really, really, really sick people.
Yep.
My first year out felt like another year of residency training with the amount of sickness that I saw coming into the clinic, not even in the hospital setting. So with that being said, I met a now friend and colleague who told me about the program and said it would be a good idea for me. So I looked into it and thought that it would be interesting because there are a lot of aspects of anti-aging functional medicine that can be applied to our traditional practices in the clinic. So after going through the modules and coursework and testing, and even there was a verbal exam and a written exam.
Yeah, to get certified, it's
Yeah.
actually, there's a
Yeah.
cross-examination.
And I felt like it was pretty interesting. It wasn't a hard study. It was actually a very interesting study that was quite applicable. The first real patient of mine happened to be my husband, so he was my guinea pig. I tried a lot of different things on him, and what was pretty interesting about doing functional medicine, anti-aging medicine, is it has a lot of different parts to it. There's
Sure.
not just one thing to focus on. So you have the diet, which is a huge part. What someone is taking in every day, and you ask the question of, can we prevent diseases, or can we at least manage them a little bit better
Right.
with some of those ideals? And so changing my diet first and my husband's diet, we started to notice significant changes, improvement in your energy level. You learn a lot about supplements and nutrients to add to your regimen. Exercise is a major part of that. Strength training is another major part of that. So I found the whole study to be interesting and applied it to us first. And when people started to recognize the results, there were a lot of questions. What are
Sure.
you doing to your husband?
Right.
How did he lose that weight?
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. What was interesting,
And that's how we started talking about it, wasn't it?
absolutely.
Yeah, I can't remember exactly what it came up, but he said, "Man, I did that, and I feel a lot." He's like, "I feel a ton better."
Yeah.
And then I told him my story. I was putzing around. Not, I'd eat one meal a day, but it was, it wasn't the right meat. It wasn't the right things. Zero sleep. Less than 4 hours of sleep a night. I'm a workaholic anyway, so I considered it a badge of honor. Like if I can survive on 4 hours of sleep, I'm just better than everybody else. Stressed out constantly, not to mention, probably toxin exposure, and I'm constantly getting irradiated doing what I do. So I woke up and had polyarthralgia. And I dealt with it for like 6 months. Just ignored it for dealt with it. I ignored it for 6 months. And then finally I asked Dr. Abel, and and he ran some labs, and my ANA came back positive. I was like, that of course freaked me out quite a lot. And in the usual type A surgeon manner, went the exact opposite, cleaned up everything, got all this, started reading, he was, do you want to take X, Y, or Z? I was like, no, I don't want to take that. I'm not taking methotrexate, or I can't remember what the other things were. It's like, no, that won't work. And so, and I can't remember exactly what my titer was. I think it was like 1 to 1800 or 1600, something like that, and got it down to, less than 180. And so really, in my mind, had an effect on what was going on. Arthralgia's improved. I felt better. Just everything was better. My mind actually, so I did that once I got sugar out after about 60 days. It was amazing because there was such a craving. And it was such a thing that I just couldn't control. I couldn't control not going in and grabbing a donut if it was available and just shoving it in my mouth and then going and see the next patient. Well, one of the things that I like about what we do is keep people fed. I think that's just a mainstay of thing. Keep people fed. And so part of the diet that I present to our patients is gluten-free. The diet is basically gluten-free, dairy-free, sugar-free. But you can eat as many green leafy vegetables and colorful vegetables and beef, chicken, and fish with a little fruit thrown in as you want. Stay fed, because this is better than what you're doing now. And we've had some really good results with it. I don't know. What diets are you using for? And I have a lot of poor patients, and it seems like they're able to understand and do that. So it's like football coach said, keep it simple, stupid. Gluten-free, dairy-free, sugar-free, and we talk about it all the time.
So I definitely believe that you're doing that, because I saw a patient today that said you got onto them about their diets. And she said today, I am on a very, very strict diet. And I was like, who put you on this diet? She said, I went and saw Dr. Morgan and I'm struggling. I was like, well, why are you struggling? She says, I can only eat meat, fruits, and vegetables, and I am struggling, Dr. Crenshaw. I said, okay. I thought that was pretty interesting, but she was at least trying.
Yeah.
And I do believe in when we instruct our patients on their diet to make it as simple as we possibly can, because I see a lot of people who get very frustrated and discouraged because they feel like they can't eat anything. If you tell them that they're diabetic, or if you tell them that they're hypertensive, man, I can't eat nothing but salads. And that's not the truth. So, for the most part, what I do is instruct them on a low salt diet. Don't add extra salt. Keeping in mind that canned vegetables have a high sodium content. So you want to limit that. But like you mentioned, we do see a lot of people who have issues with their finances. And so canned goods is the best option that they have. So rinse those canned vegetables off, or consider getting frozen if you have a deep freezer. So you can put those in your freezer and warm those up later. Experimenting with vegetables is another instruction I give some of my patients. Try something different. Of course, here in the South, a lot of people like collard greens, and that's their only real vegetable that they get in. If you start mentioning anything other than that in
you can
lettuce,
mention turnip greens.
Yeah, you can mention turnips. Or if you make mention of salads, that's about it. But when you start naming other vegetables like squash and zucchini and okra and Brussels sprouts, they're like,
colorful
oh no,
vegetables,
doc, I don't eat
have
those.
to get them back into your diet.
Yes.
They like those, but they got to be in a casserole with
cheese on it.
With a bunch of butter and a bunch of other
with
stuff.
fatback.
That's a good point.
Ham hock.
Yeah. So I definitely mentioned that. And also you want to taste the rainbow. So not Skittles, not sugar, but colorful foods and fruits as well.
Oh, that's great. Taste the rainbow. I love it.
Yeah. And you want to experiment with different fruits and vegetables as well. So I talk about that, and then meats and proteins. So it's a very tough thing to for some of my patients to grab. Fried is not the only option for your meats. So let's try baked, broiled, rotisserie, something other than fried, because the cholesterol levels, triglyceride levels, and LDL cholesterol are high. And I can tell which one of my patients are eating a lot of fried foods. I actually have some that tell me they eat fried food every single day, and
Yeah.
they're not going to change it.
Well, it's like mine. You know, I smoke. I smoked yesterday. I smoked when I was 14. I'm going to smoke tomorrow. Thank you for telling me that it's bad for me, because everybody has, but I'm not quitting.
Right.
You know, and then
right.
you just say, okay.
And
I mean,
that's a
there's
tough barrier to break.
carotid plaques from their intestines. So that's super interesting. And and then the other study was a murine mouse study, and it showed that that mice that had an intestinal permeability issue had the same lipid profile as those patients that we feel are at high risk for cardiovascular disease. So low HDL, they had high LDL fractions that were associated with vascular disease. And so what does that show? Well, to me, it shows that intestinal permeability is and the liver are causing those changes in the cholesterol profile. But why are they doing it? They're doing it to try to absorb that LPS that's being transmigrated across the gut barrier. And then that's winding up in these vascular beds. And that's the reason those vascular beds are then becoming inflamed. And so we know that vascular disease is a disease of inflammation. And so that is super interesting. Now, it'll take a few years, I think, for that to actually get in the textbooks, but it really goes back to this idea of changing your diet, decreasing the inflammatory profile, that vascular disease itself is an inflammatory disease. But that's astounding. And it really, I mean, it goes back, and the reason it goes back to the cholesterol part was, you know, this war on cholesterol, I think, has also been a war on hormones. I mean, so what are the two things that you see on TV now? Low T, and everybody's got an estrogen issue. We're all hot, you know, all of our ladies are hot and got an issue, and then, you know, everybody's worried about low testosterone. Well, you got to think, has this war on cholesterol, because we need cholesterol for all our hormones and our reproduction. So it's a normal part of physiology, which is, I mean, obviously we understand, but the lay public doesn't understand. And so has that caused some of these problems?
You know, I was fascinated when I went to one of Brittany's conferences. I think it was in Las Vegas. And I went to one of the meetings because I was fascinated. By that time, I had already lost 70 pounds being her guinea pig.
Dude.
And
With dietary changes.
Wow.
awesome.
Yeah.
That's impressive.
Yeah.
Dietary and exercise only.
When we got married, which was back in 2013, I was over 300 pounds. And I was about 300 and probably about 305 pounds. And we got married, and we came back, moved to Thomasville after our wedding, and I knew I was morbidly obese. Now, a lot of people say, well, you don't look like it because I'm tall and just kind of have a big body habit. It's by nature, but I was definitely obese. What was interesting, though, I knew I had to lose weight. Brittany at that time was in the mix of completing her coursework, and once she completed it, I started deciding to work out. Well, she immediately noticed that I was working out, but my dietary habits were not changing. And it's the old adage that says you can't out-train a bad diet.
Oh, no doubt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I was eating horribly. And so the first thing, once I said, well, Brittany, what can you do to help me? She said, the first thing we got to change the way you eat. And so she went and interrogated my whole cupboard. I love cereal. I love bread. I love sodas. And so I started
And we
learning.
do have this on camera, right?
Yeah.
And so I
You'll be
started
able to play
learning,
that.
which
We'll
you
actually
know,
send you a little JPEG of that
I
part.
think I need
Yeah.
that.
which I was wondering, okay, why did I marry her? I mean, okay, did I marry the wrong person? Because she was coming at the heart of what I like to do.
Well,
which
she
was-
loves you, so she
Absolutely.
she wanted to have you
that's-
around for a while.
And that's exactly right.
Yeah.
But she changed my diet. She eliminated, all the cereal, that all left, all the bread, that all left, all the sodas, that all left. And what she started doing was meal planning. And so going back to what you mentioned, I think a key factor in my weight loss was I went from eating these large meals every day to eating small meals several times a day. And so she would meal plan with protein and vegetables. And sure enough, it was amazing. Within about, 2 weeks, I lost about 15 pounds because part of her training was doing an elimination phase and also doing detoxification, which she started, teaching me about detox.
The magic words, detoxification.
Yes. So, I learned
What
from
does that
her.
mean? What does that mean to you and to our lay public out there? Because I think, there's a lot of hokiness.
Yes.
Like people,
Yes.
especially before I got into this. Let's think.
Yes.
Somebody said detoxification. I'd have kind of given you the,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's not
you
real
one
medicine.
of those doctors.
Well,
You a
what-
detoxification doctor.
well, I went
Yeah.
to I
That's
went,
not real medicine.
I went to one lecture that put it in perspective for me. It was a lecture again in Las Vegas. And again, I was an attendee at this time. I wasn't a member of A4M. And the lecture, I never forget, it was called Gut on Fire, Brain on Fire. And what he was teaching was that the phenomenon of leaky gut syndrome, of when you get a permeated gut from bad dietary habits, you incorporate microbiota and other basically toxins that get ingested into the vasculature and promotes inflammation.
Sure.
Which I began to appreciate because the one fact I noticed was when I was obese was that I would always have this brain fog. I mean, I would be very busy.
100%.
I would be
totally experience the
I'd
same
be
thing.
extremely busy, and I thought I was doing all the right things, but I was limiting my sleep, and I would always have this fog all day long. And the more I slept, it didn't get any better.
You weren't
But-
sleeping.
When I wasn't sleeping, that's right.
I was snoring too.
Well, exactly.
I tell you that's the other thing that went away to a certain extent.
That's right. That's right.
So-
So
I ended up doing
I don't know if you're sworn or not.
Yeah.
We go on a fishing trip every year, and they're like, "You and Sean are fishing together." That's because we snore.
Yeah,
You're sleeping
because
in the
Brittany
same room.
noticed I was sleeping excessively, and actually I ended up getting a sleep study because I actually thought I had sleep apnea syndrome. Come to find out, my diagnosis was sleep deprivation. So to her credit, she acknowledged the fact I wasn't sleeping enough. But this brain fog always just bewildered me. I mean, it was just I would go around, I couldn't really remember things as again, being productive as a nephrologist. But this lecture changed me because when he identified the correlation between leaky gut syndrome and dementia and some of the diseases that go along with dementia, Alzheimer's, Lewy body syndrome, all these diseases, there was a direct correlation between leaky gut and brain disease. And so immediately I caught a hold to it. And thanks to Brittany incorporating things in my diet, which included probiotics to help cleanse my gut, and then also the detoxification phase, which learning from Brittany, detoxification is not just cleaning your gut, but also cleaning your liver, which there are phases, you have your first phase and a second phase of liver detox. When I started learning about that, and then there's an elimination phase where you don't eat, things radically change.
Yeah.
Change.
Actually helps remedy that. But when you ask, well, what causes leaky gut, it all goes back to something that you're ingesting, something that you're putting in. So certain types of foods, or the SAD diet, standard American diet, or thinking about how often we prescribe medications that contribute to that leaky gut. NSAIDs, or non-steroidal anti-inflammatories, are a major issue. And of course, being married to a nephrologist, I try not to prescribe those as much.
Right.
But you kind of
you don't want to give him more patients than he can handle.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, don't want to do that. But those NSAIDs contribute to the leaky gut syndrome. So trying to be mindful of what medications a person could be on that could contribute to those issues. You see a lot of people that may have issues with constipation or diarrhea or microscopic colitis. And then when you query about their diets and you see what they're getting in, there's all a correlation to it. Then when you look at the rest of their medical history, it's all pro-inflammatory issues. So inflammation of the gut affects a lot of all of your other body systems.
Yeah.
So it goes back to the diet.
The diet. That's right. So this is just for are you having these conversations with your patients?
I try to have them on a daily basis.
It's so hard.
It is very hard. It is very hard. So back to what you said earlier, keeping it very simple.
Yeah.
I have been known to fuss at some of my patients when I know that they're doing wrong or they bring the evidence of it. You know, you get ready to listen to their lungs and that pack of cigarettes.
It's still sitting there.
It's right there.
It's like, look, dude.
Or you say, no, Dr. Crenshaw, I've not been eating any sweets, and you look down in the purse and there's a bag of candy there.
Right.
Like, you could remove that before you came in and saw me. So if they have the evidence on them, I will point those things out.
Cheeto fingers.
Yeah.
That orange telltale
Well, this is a
dust.
10 out of 10 pain.
Yes.
Okay, well, I can help you. I can make this 100% better. It's going to take 3 days. You need to eliminate these 3 things from your diet. I just can't do it, though.
Can't do
I
it.
just can't do it.
I mean, how many patients do you have that aren't like 7, 8, 9, 10 out of 10 anyway?
On pain?
I'm always like 10 out of 10 is emergency room.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It's always an
And
8
they're like,
or 9.
okay, it's a 9.
Please don't call the ambulance. Yeah.
You know, it's all relative. If you're sitting in the room smiling and talking, then I'm like, nah, this can't be 10 out of 10. You may have some pain. I do believe that there's pain there, but 10 out of 10, not so much. So, dealing with pain is another major issue. And I think a lot of pain issues can be helped by just moving. So I try to talk about
and
the
a little bit
diet,
of exercise and get
up
people
and
back
move.
out. And I mean, there's a really good study in vascular disease that showed that for a claudicant who could go either way, either surgery or not, let's just say. So they're either way. If you put them on a observed exercise program and they do it for 6 months, that there is no difference between angioplasty, meaning that they had a type A lesion, you went in and you fixed it, and the patient who went in and went out and actually exercised. And so, but it is amazing how many times I tell somebody that and they still go, just please fix it tomorrow. You know, our society is just so built like that.
Give me
so
a pill for it. I might take it.
Give me a pill or do the easy.
It's
thing.
hard to change diets. I mean, it really is. It's, you touched on it a lot when you're like, look, it was changing everything. And going back, I remember talking to Tripp. Going back to the beginning of the podcast, there was no way you were just eating one meal a day.
So he didn't
That
mention
might
the
have been
snacks in
like,
between.
you might have been counting the meal that we were at after work,
Right.
but you didn't count.
I didn't
like
count
the stuff,
midnight snack. Yeah.
the farm got, or you didn't count lunch.
Right.
You didn't count breakfast, and you didn't count any of the stuff in between your.
That's your accountability partner.
Yeah, no
that's-
doubt, man.
that-
So
Well,
I tell
he
you,
had to clean the story up a little bit because I noticed Daryl made it seem like it was very seamless how his diet just changed.
just changed overnight.
No.
You know,
It
one
takes
day
a lot of work.
it does take
I mean,
work.
it takes a ton of work.
But you have to be crafty too. So I waited for him to go to work and I emptied out the sodas out the refrigerator and filled it with water so he couldn't put anything else in the refrigerator. So therefore,
that's
we
awesome.
eliminated a lot of calories just by drinking
Yeah,
water.
I mean,
and he
sodas
doesn't
are
have
horrible.
time. You guys have very similar schedules, so he doesn't have time to buy groceries. So
Yeah, and it's tough.
So when
It's
the
tough
groceries
to,
just appear, it's a lot easier to
Exactly.
eat clean when it's a
Yeah.
clean thing in the pantry.
Yeah.
I totally get
yeah,
that.
it's tough to it's tough to meal plan, and then it's tough to. There's a financial aspect to eating well.
Yeah.
There really is, because the things that you need to do to eat well tend to cost way more than stopping by Burger King or McDonald's and grabbing a value meal.
and it's
I-
definitely more time consuming.
Yeah. Most definitely. I mean, you have to take time to meal prep and everything else. And I don't know. I never got to the point where I would consider myself obese, but my BMI was going up a little bit higher than I wanted it to go. And I had to clean my act up a little bit, and I did last year. And Tripp sent me this thing that he was doing, and it was, I mean, when I read eat one organ,
Oh no, he's talking about organ meats.
I was like, I'm not
So
eating
I love
any-
the idea of organ meats. I mean, I can't say that I actually have participated in it, but I do like the idea of it. I mean,
the diet I got
liver
from
given,
him.
at least all of your B vitamins, coenzyme Q and all the cofactors coming from heart, pancreas. I mean, it just hasn't. I mean, so instead of doing that, that's actually a really good transition into supplements. So, what supplements do you recommend, and where do you go with that? And is it different depending on different? I'm sure it's different depending on your patient.
Yeah. So, if you're considering the ideology of anti-aging medicine, there's
God, is that? That actually I can actually hear when you did that.
So just for our audience, we're trying something new today. We've got new headphones. We got got a little bit of new everything. And if you hit this little button,
what is it?
I have no idea what the little button is, but it actually
God.
makes everything perfect.
Do you have to hold it down?
Yeah, you have to hold it down. That doesn't make sense. That doesn't make sense.
Were we supposed to do that the whole time?
No,
I don't know, but
pretty
it's
sure
so
we're
much
okay. I
better.
think this is just for the sound,
Yeah.
but that's pretty cool.
We need duct tape.
What?
Actually talking into the mic, so that can record you. It's only your hearing purposes that makes the recording. So that makes it.
Go through the headphones.
right.
I got you.
Yes.
So
That's
we don't
Abby
want to hold it?
McIntosh, our producer in training.
Yeah, I've been.
So we got Nikki, our producer, and Abby McIntosh, our producer in training. We're trying a whole new setup today, so hopefully everything works out. But so if we're playing with things a little too much, that's the reason, and, and we're sorry.
Well, no, we
The
appreciate it.
Crenshaws are guinea pigs today.
They are.
Yeah.
Doctors like
We
stuff like
appreciate
that. So
Wow, everybody's holding their thing.
Yeah, it's
know it.
actually kind of
Yeah.
it actually sounds so much better.
Yeah.
It does.
So yeah.
Yeah.
So you were asking about the supplements.
Yeah, go ahead.
So several things to keep in mind. Number one, a multivitamin
Mhm.
is what I would recommend if someone was interested in doing that, or we were trying to clean up their gut and start over fresh. So multivitamin. Number two, omega-3 fatty acids is another recommendation that I learned in the A4M training. Number three, vitamin D supplementation. And number four, a daily probiotic. I actually, after I finished the program, I started taking the probiotic myself. And I like the changes and improvement. You feel better overall. And there's a lot of different reasons why you should take a daily probiotic, because it helps replenish the good bacteria in the gut. Thinking about the idea of leaky gut, it helps improve the caliber of the stools. For those that are constipated, it actually helps with their bowel regimen. So that's actually something that I recommend to a lot of my patients, in particular knowing that they have a pro-inflammatory diet. So at least having a probiotic will help to
That's a good point.
remedy that.
Yeah, vitamin D is so important. So the two things that I generally, so I have two supplements on ours: vitamin D and fish oil for vascular disease.
You tell people to freeze the fish oil before they take it.
I know it
Because
is,
that
is one,
belch
that is one
rough.
complaint.
Yeah.
I haven't found that as that a lot of our older people, because my patients generally are older, complain about that as much, but occasionally they do. Krill oil seems to be better. I mean, it's more expensive, but actually seems to be a little bit better than as far as the aftertaste goes. But there's so many like vitamin D, as far as its reparative capacity on your DNA being deficient. I mean, it's a really interesting TED talk, and it actually showed the micro machinery of DNA repair, and then showed it in a patient who had vitamin D deficiency, and the number of misprints as it's trying to fix things was increased by, and I don't remember, but it was a big factor. And so you actually, it's you don't repair your DNA as well if you're deficient in vitamin D, which obviously for an aging issue would be a big deal.
The other factor to that too is in patients with chronic kidney disease, inevitably the vast majority of them are going to develop vitamin D deficiency, and that's just because, as we know, vitamin D we acquire from the sun, and it goes through the liver to convert into 25 hydroxy vitamin D, and then it gets metabolized in the kidney. through an enzyme called 1-alpha hydroxylase, which converts it to 125 hydroxyvitamin D. That is the active form of vitamin D, which then ultimately is responsible for reabsorbing calcium in the gut. So in patients with chronic kidney disease, and inevitably all our patients with end-stage renal disease, they're all vitamin D deficient. And we see a lot of metabolic bone disease as a consequence of that,
Right.
bone fractures, and then not to mention the vascular disease, because of what happens when the vitamin D is deficient. It upregulates parathyroid hormone to the point now you get more calcium being what we call resorbed or taken out of the bone to bind with phosphorus, and ultimately that leads to calcium and phosphorus vascular calcification. So it's vitamin D deficiency is
Sounds good.
It's amazing. It's on a cellular
It's a
level.
beer podcast. I'm sorry.
Does a lot of damage, but you're absolutely right. Vitamin D, and what was interesting, Trip, about 10 years ago, I went to a meeting where there were this was in San Francisco. There were about 500 nephrologists in the room, and they did a poll on all of the nephrologists in the room who were vitamin D deficient. Well, by that time, I checked mine, and I was vitamin D deficient. I think I had a vitamin D level of 10, and about 90% of them raised their hand.
Mine was like 25.
Yeah, and 30 is the low end. It should be above 30, and as
I think
Brit-
most
Brittany-
people like around 50.
Yeah, it should
Is
be
that what
around
you
50.
want?
Yeah, you want it to be between
Yeah.
like 50 and 80.
Yeah.
And so I haven't checked a vascular patient yet and I don't check it on all of them. But when I do, I haven't checked one yet that wasn't
not a vitamin D
deficient.
Yep.
So
And so
as
yeah.
far as I mean, do you look at like osteopenia and osteoporosis? And,
Yes. Yeah. In the kidney world, it's called renal osteodystrophy, but it's the equivalent of osteoporosis in the normal patient.
And I think that's just one component, that it's a hormone that does so many different things,
Yes,
especially with D. And honestly, that's what I learned about in medical school. I mean, what yours talk about with osteopenia, I thought, oh, well, I'm a male. I don't got to worry about that. I lifted weights, but I mean, there's so many of the biochemical processes that are linked to it. It's such an important thing. And and almost everyone, we're just inside so much, and we don't generate it, and it's probably not the best thing to go out and generate it anyway because of all the skin disease issues associated with sun. So anyway, yeah, we definitely do that.
Which is interesting with the vitamin D, and Brittany could allude to this more, is with vitamin D deficiency and some of the other mineral disease deficiencies like zinc. That those contribute heavily to hormonal deficiencies, particularly testosterone. And I've checked patients who have low T, and correlating with that, usually they have vitamin D deficiency.
Oh, how
It's
interesting!
amazing.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'm gonna make sure I get my vitamin D. Might save my marriage.
It's a really good. It's a really good thing. Really good. Not the low T or this. Yeah, but
Yeah.
I see where you're going with that.
I see where you're going with that. Energy, and so that was another big thing that I have found, that my energy level, and I'm already super high octane anyway, so all the time go, but in the last few years, I could just tell, like, I couldn't wake up in the morning. Like, I've been waking up at 5 o'clock. Like, I set my alarm for 3:30 when I was in residency, and it never went off. And then I got into fellowship, and I was still waking up at 4. And then I just did the same thing when I got into private practice. And so there came a time though, I was zombied till about 9 or 10 o'clock, and this was the last 4 or 5 years. And really changing this has changed.
That was a brain fog.
It was, yeah. I mean, it was. It
Sleep
literally was,
deprivation.
like the
I mean,
ability
you
to.
already touched on that.
That and
I think that's the thing.
I will say, there's been a lot of good sleep research that came out in the last 4 or 5 years, and now I do my best to get 7 hours of sleep a night. And that has changed my life. And you're talking about low T. There's actually a really good study that shows that if you'll get 8 hours of sleep a night, your testosterone will go up 20%. So it is an automatic increase, and there is no drug that really compares to it except exogenous testosterone.
Yeah.
So
The other wonderful increase is weightlifting, and
Oh, yeah.
and Brittany actually educated us, because one of the things that helped me with my weight loss was we started doing high intensity interval training. You know, I was accustomed to getting on a treadmill and walking or doing something a little more mundane, thinking that was going to attribute to the weight loss. But what we started doing was working
That was
out.
boring.
I like her.
So we started working out like 30. I know.
I know.
Well, he looked at me like, do you do that?
He's like, yeah, no.
So it was very enlightening to know that that 30 minutes of a high intensity workout with weights and with resistance training would actually improve your T and quite honestly improve your time in the bedroom.
Yeah, no doubt.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Let's go ahead and put that out there. You heard it here, folks.
So yes, we found the benefit to
Very
exercise
good.
and
Yeah.
high
Heart and
intensity
lung,
interventional
cardio.
interval training.
He hadn't quit smiling since he said that.
No, it's just the truth. Thumbs up.
So,
That was awesome.
you know, you talk about how we incorporate some of these things into your regular practice. And to be quite honest, I get bored on the treadmill.
Yeah.
I can't see where I'm going. Like, where's the end to this? So I just find that to be really boring. But we tried out this boot camp, high intensity interval training. And at first I was a little resistant to it because I didn't want to get bulky and I wasn't going for that look. But I found that strength training is great for your overall health, for muscle building, for weight loss. I think sometimes we have this idea that yes, you do gain muscle, which does cause you to gain some weight, but an important aspect of weight loss is actually doing strength training.
Sure.
And you don't have to spend hours at a time on a treadmill to lose weight. There are times where we've gone to the gym and we can go in and do a 30-minute workout and someone can still be on the treadmill for 1 or 2 hours. And you don't really see as much of a change.
Right.
I was actually reading an article the other day that talked about if you want to see your body change in different ways, consider the body types of people who do certain types of exercises. So the body type of a person who cycles versus the body type of a marathon runner versus the type of body for those that do high intensity interval training or a swimmer. And you can see that there are actually different body styles and types based on the type of exercise they do. So my recommendation and my personal philosophy is switch it up, change it, and do something that you actually enjoy doing.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
You know,
Yeah,
it's
definitely.
interesting because and this also I learned from Brittany, because I was the one that would, at 300 pounds, I would go run and try to jog 6-7 miles. And then she educated me. If you look at the average marathon runner, actually, unfortunately, they have a high degree of inflammation. And so if you look at if you look at their body,
I was just thinking about that.
yeah, if you look
Yeah.
at their body habits and you look at them, they don't really have much muscle mass. But you look at a sprint runner or some,
Disease as well as coronary disease. And so it's the exact same mechanism as leaky gut from the stress of running long distances over a long period of time. So interesting that the vascular biology actually correlates with the exact same thing that we started out talking about.
yeah, we used to do. Brittany and I, we have this one hobby. We do Spartan
So it means
races.
don't run.
No,
Just kidding. we just lost a bunch of marathoners this podcast.
That's right.
No, it's
But
still
we
a
may have
good,
saved their
it's
lives at
still
the
a
same
good form
time,
of
so we don't even know.
It's still a
exercise.
good
You just
form
have
of
to do it in
exercise.
moderation.
That's
There you
right.
go.
Have
I
you-
like.
we-
I love her.
oh yeah. She
Yeah.
actually, a group of us, we've done the Spartan races. I don't know if you've heard of those, but they're the mud races, and they can go anywhere from
Tough
3
Mudder?
miles. it's very it's
You
the
get,
the
like,
sister of Tough Mudder.
Get
Yeah,
shocked. And
that's
stuff.
right.
Sweet. Nice.
You
That's
know.
high
No, we
intensity.
weren't getting shot.
No, we didn't get shot. Tough Mudder does a shot, but
Yeah.
this one is the
The
basically
Spartan race.
Spartan race. Multiple obstacles up to. We've done up to 17 miles. We've actually went to Mount
No,
Killington in
you
Vermont.
went. I visited.
Yeah, and
I was the cheerleader.
it's kind of a rite of passage. But what was fascinating is that one of my colleagues, the way he trained, was that he would run, 18 miles to train, and it was amazing. He's a colleague of ours, and it's amazing the times he would do that. When he was done running, he would go to work, and literally he would have hours of diarrhea and have this tremendous flu-like illness. He would have to go home.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. It was horrible.
Yep.
The
The fever, the chills.
It's a 24-hour flu.
Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, it made me look into it. We found that, and then the correlation between that and the biology makes sense. So,
Which also makes me think about the cortisol levels of runners.
Very good.
Because you mentioned the
Yes.
stress of running, and there's a good stress and then there's the bad stress. But I can only imagine, based on the physiological response with the diarrhea, the fatigue, and the flu-like illness, that the cortisol levels were up.
yeah. Oh, which brings us to another great point. So diet is one of the things that I taught that if I can get. So here's kind of what I do. So have a patient come in, they got really bad vascular disease and they're kind of on the edge, and I get them, if I can get them to commit to the diet and like do it for a month and sort of get on that, then we talk a little bit about sleep. Then, the next time we'll say, okay, well, you're doing this, so sleep would be my second thing. And then stress and like the whole mental aspect to that, because everybody's life is stressed out. I mean, you ask modern people what's going on, how are you? Busy. Everybody's just busy. We're so hyper stimulated in everything. There's really good stuff, 30 minutes a day. Just 30 minutes a day of prayer. I mean, if you're not religious, then just some sort of mindfulness activity will take those hormones and stress levels sort of back down to normal, along with the 7 hours of sleep. And I sort of try to get them to commit to one thing at a time. I don't know. Do y'all, is that sort of a?
Yes,
Yes,
I actually, committing to one thing at a time, because I find that I will get overwhelmed trying to make so many changes in a 15-minute office visit. That's not going to happen. The patient gets overwhelmed because they think that they can't do anything and they have all of these restrictions. Even for some patients, just to get them to commit to drinking water is huge.
Right.
Yeah, that's a big deal.
I've asked people, well, when was the last time you had a glass of water? And I actually had a patient that couldn't think of the last time they had water.
Oh, wow.
Do you ever
Months had
have
passed
patients say, well, beer has water in it?
I've heard those types of things, or the ice cubes in their drinks. But sometimes just starting with one thing, even like when we talk to patients about not smoking, okay, can you smoke one less cigarette a day? Or could you just drink one bottle of water a day, make one small change, and then bring them back for a follow-up visit? Were you able to do that? Were you able to drink a bottle of water? Okay, let's see if you can go to 2. Or let's see if you can cut down 2 cigarettes, just to make small changes. And when they see the benefit of those changes, then they're more likely to make the long-term change or a lifestyle change. So with Daryl here, once I eliminated all the sugary drinks and the sodas and the energy drinks and all of that stuff, and he stopped drinking sodas. I remember the first time, this is before I even did the A4M training, when he stopped drinking sodas, and we were dating long distance at this time. This is before we got married. He came to visit me, and he was 20 pounds lighter. And I
20
was like,
pounds.
what did you do? He was like, I just stopped
Yeah.
drinking sodas.
And part of it was that I would justify and say I was drinking the diet sodas, but I learned about the aspartame from Brittany that it actually makes you gain. It can actually make you put on weight, and so any of the artificial sweeteners are have been told off limits. One of the things, thankfully, that I stopped doing was consuming a lot of sugar, just from what Brittany was telling me, and not only that, but even some of the artificial sweeteners, I didn't know it, that Splenda was actually 100 times sweeter than regular sugar, and so primarily now my only form of sweetening is stevia.
So this concept of the microbiome or your gut bacteria being its own organ, I find just fascinating.
Mhm.
And one of the things with getting back a little bit healthier is, or getting that part I feel like is healthier, is it sustains things easier. So, and this is what another thing I tell patients, like, I'm not taking bread away from you forever. Just think of it as a treat. And I'm not taking all these, if you really like an egg, and I don't know, whatever, cheese and a cheese egg omelet, I'm not taking cheese away from you forever, but just don't make it a component of every part of your meal.
Mhm.
And I found personally that that I'm more resistant than I was. Like, it seems like the function of it is better and better able to deal with, say, gluten and dairy than I was before, and I don't feel as bad. I can definitely tell when I've gone for the mouth pleasure. Brought
Hold
to you
on
by
a second.
Pretoria
You know,
Fields
so
Sholey
his
IPA
whole
today.
diet is based upon eliminating all the bad things,
Mhm.
so you can have some carbohydrates.
No, right.
Yeah,
right.
and
There- there
and
they
a
are
little
right
and just a
there.
little bit of gluten.
A little bit.
You know, it's interesting. I've noticed over the last several years the impact of gluten and dairy in patients, especially my younger patients with kidney disease and particularly glomerular disease. I just had a young girl I saw a couple of weeks ago. She's a freshman in college, and if you looked at her, she looks like this total bill of health. But she had a substantial amount of protein in her urine, which is one of the biggest markers for kidney disease. And so ultimately, we ended up conducting a kidney biopsy, and she had what was called minimal change.
If you eat a heavy carbohydrate diet, that will cause you to be more fatigued if the hormones are out of whack and estrogen levels off, or for a male, if his testosterone levels are off, then that can definitely attribute to adrenal fatigue. It's an overall phenomenon that affects the person's entire function.
Is there any muscular pain associated with it?
It can be, yeah. If you think about the person who has obstructive sleep apnea, and then they have the periodic limb disorder, and they wake up really tired with muscle aches, but they're not sleeping well, and they're not getting good oxygen to their brains in the process.
All those people diagnosed with fibromyalgia for the past 20 years.
Yeah.
We need to go back.
Well, it's amazing the cases I've seen with adrenal fatigue in the hospital, where essentially the adrenal gland is burned out. They can't get out of bed.
Yeah.
That's usually the kind of the hint. Maybe we need to check some tests to see if the adrenal gland is totally wiped out. But it's fascinating. I do think even when you look at the adrenal gland, there are other hormones that are in the adrenal gland that now have become recognized to play a role with high blood pressure. Not to mention now that the science is showing that diseases of the adrenal gland are grossly underdiagnosed in the medical community. Whether you have adrenal fatigue, we should be checking cortisol levels. I know in Brittany's level of training, they check oral levels, oral cortisol levels, salivary cortisol. But even on our field aspect, where we're looking for hypertension, in other words, secondary causes for hypertension. Historically, it was always thought that about 95% of all Americans, if they have high blood pressure, it's genetic. It's what we call idiopathic.
Yeah.
But now
doctors were just idiots.
That's right. Exactly.
That's right.
Exactly.
That's what I tell the patients.
Exactly.
It's idiopathic means we're idiots. We can't figure out what
Absolutely.
it is. But I think that was the thing that was after multiple Mark Houston, who's a cardiologist at Vanderbilt, and he's big in the A4M community, and watching some of his lectures on hypertension, almost completely, his point is the high blood pressure is a symptom. It's not a disease.
That's right.
We got to figure out what the cause of
That's
it
right.
is. And there is a cause. And so going through those things, and I think part of it is that drug companies came up with things to lower your blood pressure, and we thought we were curing something. We really weren't.
No.
We were just putting a stop
No.
on it.
No.
We were making ourselves feel better.
Absolutely.
Feel a lot better.
The number one cause of now, and it's underdiagnosed, is sleep apnea syndrome. It's the leading cause, secondary cause. And then right below that is excessive aldosterone, levels of aldosterone, which now,
Like in the South, I think that's a thing. I don't know why it's but for African American population, especially when I first started practicing, because I was a pharmacist before, went to pharmacy school and then medical school, and so they've been on 5 different medicines, and that was one of the things that I would put them on, and it was invariably it is huge, like aldosterone brought spironolactone. It's a good thing. So one of the new things that we're getting into, which has changed here, the laws have changed here recently, are hemp and cannabidiol. So if y'all, if you don't want to talk about it, that's fine.
No, that's
but
fine.
I just threw you.
I did. I threw y'all both under the bus.
No.
So if you have an opinion on it, that'd be interesting. Because I definitely have an opinion on it. We could talk about it a little bit. So CBD oil, just specifically, stay out of THC, but CBD oil. And if you,
I really don't have much of an opinion on it.
I actually, it's interesting. I would say this may even be more, you may say anecdotally. I've had several patients that have come to me just kind of as a second opinion. These are patients that I've who confide in me, and I'm gonna tell you that the patients that have come to me fit the category. They're in their 60s and 70s, and the majority of them are Caucasian. So you're talking about these older Caucasian patients who have come to me because they share similar spiritual beliefs, and so they actually come to me for a second opinion, just to say from a spiritual perspective, is this something to do? The doctor has asked them, is it okay to take medical marijuana? And I told them, I said, well, listen, and this is just my personal view. I said, well, God does make everything in the earth. I said, it's not so much what it is how it's being used. And so what it has done for those kind of patients, it has given them a peace of mind. And it's amazing. The patients because mind you, when they came to me, they were severely depressed. They were in chronic pain. Some of them were at the point of wanting just to end it all and say, listen, I'm done with everything. And they would come to me and say, Dr. Crenshaw, what do you think? And I said, well, listen, give it a try. I would see those patients within a few months, and it would be like night and day. And again, I don't understand the science of it, but I will say that the few patients that have done it, just because I've told them that, rather than to just stop living, to give it a try, it's amazing the effect that it has had on them, and I think it's been very positive.
That's super cool. There's a lab out of Sweden, and obviously it was a Schedule 1 drug in the United States since I think the 1960s or maybe even late 50s, and so we haven't done any research on it in a long time. But you actually have a CBD system within you, cannabidiol receptors, and you have endogenous cannabidioids, and I tell you the one that I like the best is if you're completely full, and yet somebody was to put something that was really like delicious in front of you, say you're super full, but grandma made your favorite cake, okay? The stimulant that allows you to eat that cake and get a little more full, a little less full, that's your CBD system. So that's kind of neat. But anyway, so I'm glad to hear your
that twinkle in his eye again.
that little twinkle in your eye. Yeah, well, it's a 7 transmembrane receptor,
Absolutely.
just like just like your some of your other G protein mediated receptors. So it's there. It was meant for something. We either evolved with the plant, or we co-evolved way long time ago away from it. Thank y'all very much. Well, number one, anything else you want to say?
Oh, this has been awesome.
Yeah,
It's fun.
y'all enjoyed it. Yeah,
Yeah.
good. Well, it was a little bit of an experiment today. We'll. I know we got the audio down. We'll see how the video turns out. I had rescheduled with y'all a couple of times, so I didn't want to have to reschedule this time because I was looking forward to it. I'll be
This is
honest,
awesome.
a
Thank you.
little bit selfish. It was awesome. Thank you. I
It was
appreciate
nice
it.
to finally meet you.
Yes, you too. We talked on the phone a couple of times, and we both see each other's patients.
Yeah.
So we appreciate all of that, and thank y'all.
Thank
You're
you.
very welcome.
Yeah, excellent.
Excellent.